welcome everyone. This is our webinar series. Bruce is in
Look at
his Ferrari. I
Bruce
love it.
in his Ferrari. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. This is our webinar series. Tonight we have Chris Paulis with us. Chris is a fantastic photographer and retoucher, and he is tonight going to be talking about photographic restoration. I've seen some of his work. He's worked on some images for me, for my family, and does fantastic work. And they've all, not all of them, but a lot of them have won awards. So with much further ado, Chris Paulis, please take us in.
Much further ado? You're
Let's
going to
go.
do some more do? Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. So let me see how we can swap you here. And just have to find my
screen share, Chris.
Screen share. There it is. All righty. So I see you all hanging out at the right now. And whoops, that wasn't what I was supposed to share. Let me unshare that. Now I've gotten myself into trouble. Stop share. That's what it is. I shared the wrong thing. Give me a second. Let me try this again. Trouble is oh, that's why. When I went to Zoom, it opened something different that I really didn't want to have. So hang on, bear with me while I goof around here and figure out. There it is. Okay. Okay, so I had done a version of this presentation for the Quarren-Con that went on recently. In that one, my emphasis, while it was sort of an intro or just a quick glimpse into photographic restoration, I had a little bit of a slant on it for competition, because there's a lot of restoration stuff out there, and there are a lot of people that do retouching. But when you're doing restoration for competition, the bar goes significantly higher. So what I want to do in what I've planned for tonight, it's a different version than what I did then. So if you saw that one, you'll see some new stuff here, including a couple of pre-recorded mini videos of particular techniques as I work on a restoration that I'm doing right now. So let's wander in and take a look. Some of you know this, some may not. For people like Ted, who wouldn't know this because he's new to all of us. By the way, welcome Ted to Maryland PPA. Ted is from Easton, has just earned his CPP and contacted me through Bob Coates and the Loop to find out what steps he might take to work on his master photographer degree, and he's underway. So how did I get into photographic restoration? I was pursuing the master artist degree, and basically the purpose in earning that degree was to improve my Photoshop skills. So I was on the hunt for ways in which I could strengthen those skills. Started off with some composite work, and soon just sort of occasional jobs and requests would come my way. I've had a genealogy hobby for almost 30 years. And so I've had photos that I've wanted to retouch, and I started working on some of those. So the two just sort of hook really nicely together. And I found myself doing more restorations and submitting them to competition. And the majority of my master artist merits came through photographic restoration, along with a smattering of composites and some abstract compositions, and a little bit of, I'm into digital painting a little bit too. But anyway, got hooked on it, love it. As you all know, or if you don't know, competition is a great way to get feedback and grow your skills and constantly push yourself to get better. And that's sort of something that makes me tick. I don't like being static. Until I got to photography, my hobbies lasted only 5 years. I'd get bored with them, put them aside. Photography, I just look for new stuff to do and ways to get better. So still learning, still growing. When I stop, I'll be done with all of this, I think. Anyway, so let's, here's the the image that Danny mentioned, this is a photograph. The very bottom was a class photo. You could see it was folded like 8 times and in an envelope. And Danny handed it off to me a couple of years ago, and I sort of took up the challenge. And that one was a finalist this past year in the restoration category of IPC. So let's talk a little bit about what is the target. When you're doing restoration, I see a lot of things pass through competition as a juror in training that, I mean, my work is not where I want it to be yet. So any comments I'm making are not to say I'm the greatest that ever was. I've got a long way to go. But there are certain things that just are a baseline that until you're able to accomplish them, you're not quite there. So the first thing is, the target is to bring back to or put back into a former or original state. That's what you'll find in the dictionary for the term restoration, whether it's a photograph or a home or something else, an artwork. It's to basically put it back to the way it was. Now, we don't always know. So our job here is not full-on artistry to exercise your imagination, create something that never existed before. You're first trying to restore, not reinterpret what was. You want to remain as true to the original as possible. Now that's assuming that the original, you have an idea what that looked like. And some jobs that have come my way, I look at them, and you'll see a little later, the one we're going to walk through that I've been working on for about a month is a family photo from Georgia that there are parts of it where there's absolutely no way you know what it looked like unless you had some other help. So anyway, where details are lost in a photograph, you try to extrapolate from what remains or from historical equivalents. That's where it can get kind of fun. So if you're looking at a garment and it was photographed in the 1920s, do some research and see what similar garments looked like in 1920. So if you enjoy history, it's kind of fun to try to go look at what that period was like, and sometimes sort of work off of other photographs of that time. So yeah, you do have to create some stuff, and yes, you do have to interpret when the details aren't there in order to get it back to what it must have looked like. So I'm not going to say much beyond just this point about working on commission. I do paid restoration work, but it doesn't pay very well. There are not many people who want to pay what the time is worth. I do it mainly out of that I love it, and I like to restore memories to people. You know, the argument we give as portrait photographers that if there are no printed portraits of ancestors in a number of years, nobody's going to know what we looked like. And that's valuable. Well, it's valuable when we have an old photograph that has deteriorated and people want to know what their ancestors look like. That is a passion of mine. Anyway, as you can see on the screen here, I have a restoration photo website, and my services and how I price them are on that site. And you can see it's pretty, I mean, I can't justify having a business based on the pricing you'll see there, and very seldom do I get what I put into it. But you know, we do things for other reasons. I get paid well for my product work, my commercial work. This is something I do to sort of fuel myself. And here's sort of what you'd see. I'm not going to talk through it much other than for you to get the sense of it. I price things based on the level of difficulty and the kind of work that is going to need to be done on photos that people bring me. You'll see and you can look at it later, go to the website. These little things are sliders that allow you to see the original and then the restored photo. And basically the tier 3 is where I've got to do some Photoshop work of any kind. If it's not a simple adjustment, not a simple healing of some cracks, if I've got to repair and bring back detail, then it's going to cost a bit more. So that's enough on that. not necessarily what we want to talk about, but it's worth taking a look at that because that also suggests a sequence in terms of what I do when I restore a work. So I want to go over just sort of a general workflow. These tend to be the steps I take with lots of exceptions. The more I do this, the more I realize, that workflow didn't work on this one. I think I probably need to do it a little differently. But some things sort of hold true, and the generalization is true. So I analyze the original first, assess the damage, determine how to make the best quality digital original, in quotation marks. Whenever possible, if somebody sends me an already digitized image, I'd like to get the printed original. Sometimes that's not possible and you're sort of stuck working with what you've got. But different photos deteriorate based on the processes that made them in different ways. So I look at a photo when it comes in, and sometimes I put it on a light table and see what happens with the light coming through the back of it. And I will see detail there that you can't see on the face anymore. And knowing that suggests that I'm going to need to photograph it and not just use a flatbed scanner, which is what I would typically do. So at least one project, two maybe, I have photographed it on a light table with some pretty strong light coming through it and done multiple, almost like you would bracket the exposures. I'll do an exposure with light from the front and exposure with light from the back, and then I will merge those as I work on. So convert to black and white, preserving the original version is the first thing I do after that. Adjust tones and contrast. I'm going to show you a little of what I do with that, and a couple of tricks you're going to see in there. By the way, this session is way too brief for me to pledge that you're going to walk out of here ready to do restorations. I think you'll know a little of what's involved, and you'll think, that sounds interesting, or nope, not me. So adjusting
Chris,
tones.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Before COVID hit you guys, I know Chris and Carol Davis were going to be doing a Super One Day on photographic restoration. Have you moved your class to August?
Yes. And it's up on the website for registration for Super One Day. So yeah, we're going to do a whole day on it. So that's I'm glad you thought of that, Danny. Even that though, for one day, if you've ever taken a Photoshop class, you know that one day is never enough. And that when you show somebody one thing, if it's a group of people, we all come in with different backgrounds, and some people will get it. Some people are going to need more scaffolding to get them there. Anyway, so I go to adjusting tone and contrast. That's tier 1 on my pricing scale. Removing and repairing stains is basically the next step that I tend to address. Repair major spots, imperfections, and rips. Those are moving into tier 2 or tier 3. They're things that I've got to get hands on, use my Wacom tablet, and do work in Photoshop that can be pretty painstaking and time consuming. Eliminate scratches, dust, and specks. There's some cool things you can do to make that process a whole lot faster and easier. Then rebuild missing details, emphasizing the subject. Use such things as the clone stamp, the mixer brushes, history brushes. This is all tier 3 stuff, tier 3 and higher. Rebuild the background. At some point I do that. It might be before I do some missing details, depending on the nature of that background. If it's a simple backdrop, I'll usually extract the subject and then rebuild the background and then merge the two back again and get to work on the subject. If needed, colorize the finished image. I haven't done a lot of that, and that's an area I'd say I'm not great at yet, but I'm getting there. I do a lot of reading, a lot of YouTube watching, a lot of research on it to try to figure out how to get a little better. And then make finishing touches to integrate all the elements. High pass sharpen is something that I will often do that just sort of brings it right to where it needs to be. One technique that is just, lately I've been getting way more mileage out of is adding noise in different ways to images. You'll see why I need to do that. Noise puts texture back where my retouching had to remove it. Okay, so let's look at some originals and talk a little bit about the challenges that we see in those originals. So here's one that was brought to me. This was a hired job. What do you notice about it? Probably we don't have a lot of time for back and forth conversation. So I'll just, you'll be able to go look at this when Danny puts it back up again. But this big tear is one major thing. Notice how much fading and even color loss has happened here. This is probably a black and white, maybe one that it was sepia, but time has changed that color. And it has also put little burn marks and rips. And if you look at it closely, you would see that there's not a lot there. And look at this challenge right here. We had words on this photograph, and one of my jobs is, if at all possible, try to bring back those words, because that's part of what made this photograph special to somebody. You can see all these little sort of flaws and mars in the skin. This image was a low tier 3. It required Photoshop work, but fortunately, what made this one not quite as hard is none of those big flaws are in the face. So it's easier for me to go about making improvements in this when the face isn't involved. Face just drives the difficulty level exponentially higher. So there's the finished product. I was able to figure out what it said, partly because I think the family member knew some of that. And so I went to a new layer and basically attempted to follow what I see here and write in what it was again. I've done some restoring of texture. One thing I will say, looking back on this one, it's inadequate in the texture that I built into this sweater. And that came out in competition when it was judged, that this looks way too diagonal instead of flowing with the movement of the garment. At the time I did that, I didn't know how to do this. Now I do. I could put that texture in on a layer above and warp this in a way that makes it follow sort of the flow of his body, or at least appear to. Okay. Here's another one. Oops, I hit the button twice, but you can see some of the challenge here is this tape that is in there. Again, loss of contrast is very typical in old photographs. So you want to bring back that contrast. You want to restore detail where you can. Look at the detail in the floor. I think this is one that I photographed from behind as well as from the front, and that brought some of this grain out for me so that I could rebuild it. And then also this signature of the original photographer. Okay. This one was in this year's imaging or IPC. It was also a finalist for Restoration Grand Imaging Award, which is interesting because I ran it through the mill all year long, and a couple times it didn't even merit. But every time I put it through, I got new perspectives on what would make that a better image. I still look at it and I think, my skill set now is better than it was when I did this. I would do a whole lot better job here of cleaning up some of what's going on in the clothing. The face would be a whole lot, it's a little too smooth. I haven't put texture back and some other things, but it's a stage in the journey. But it was really tough. You can see where I began with this. Not a lot of contrast or detail here, all kinds of damage throughout the garment, a background that is basically non-existent, had to recreate the hair on the back side of the head and the top. But again, I was fortunate the face is basically intact. This was like a 20-inch tall oval print that came to me in a pair. The husband was the matching image. Now this one is the one that was on the face of this presentation. You can see the original over here. You can sort of see what some of the damage is, but if you look at this close up, here's where the challenge begins. Look at all of those specks and spots, and I don't know if it was humidity that caused this. Lots of little, almost like pencil marks everywhere. Hardly any depth. You can't tell really what the detail is in this clothing. And then down here, look at the edge of this. I think this is called a cabinet photograph. But anyway, this one was the year before last in IPC, before they made restoration its own category. And it didn't even, it merited and went in the showcase book, but didn't go alone. I still, to this day, feel like this is one of the best jobs I've ever done. Oh, why didn't we? Oh, you saw the finished one on that one when on the front page. I should have put it back down here. Anyway, so let's go. Now we're going to walk a little bit through a current project, and this is sort of the new part that I haven't done before. And Danny, it's possible that we would go beyond 6:45, and I don't blame anybody for dropping out and leaving when you have to. If you want to hang in there, there are like 3 little mini videos that I recorded while I was working. So I'm going to walk through the steps that I talked about earlier and show you from stage to stage, and then at key points, three spots, I'm going to show you what you would have seen on screen if you were looking over my shoulder. So obviously, look at the damage in this thing. This is my wife's great-great-grandfather right here. And all of these men are elders in a Southern Baptist church, and this is the day of his ordination. I think this is his father, so my wife's great-great-grandfather. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong guy. This is the great-grandfather. I think this is a great-great-grandfather. But anyway, look at this guy over here. Not much there to go on. Fortunately, somebody else in her family had a muddy looking photo. I think it might have been a photo of this photo, or one that was done at a different time. As I've worked, I've realized there's some differences between that reference image that I'm using to try to figure out what his face is and some of these other faces. And I've had to redo things several times because they look significantly different. Anyway, so the big problem here, look at all that tape and the discoloration that it caused. When you stop to think about, well, how would I restore this and deal with all this discoloration, all these marks? That's why I said I've been working on this for a month, and every project helps me learn something new. Here's where I am at this point on this one. Not finished. You can see I'm making some progress. Let's go back and forth on that a minute. Notice I've got a little bit of a face there. It looks ghostly. You'll see why in a little while. Okay, so let's move forward, and I'm going to sort of take it step at a time. So the first thing that I mentioned that I tend to do, look at the difference between these two. If you create a levels adjustment layer, and then you can make adjustments by channel. So the red, the blue, and the green channel, adjusting those until you get these blacks and whites the way you really want them to look. It's amazing, even an original black and white, that this is more of a sepia. By adjusting those, all of a sudden, these places where the photo's intact look even better. That's a great way to start. So then, this is the one I just learned recently that just blows my mind. Look at what happened between these two. All of a sudden, that discoloration is gone. And that, by simply adding a hue saturation adjustment layer, clicking the colorize box, and adjusting the hue saturation on different colors, allow you to bring everything back into the same color palette, basically. And so that's a miracle as far as I'm concerned. Learning to do that So here's our first little mini video. And if we get to the point where it looks like too many people are jumping out on us because I've gone too long and you've fallen asleep and whatever, we'll just call it a halt, or I'll jump over the videos and let you see sort of the sequence. So here is a little video of me doing what you just saw. And so what I'll suggest is keep an eye on what I do up here and keep an eye down here. So right now we're at the spot where I had already done the levels adjustment, and now I'm going to do the hue saturation. And so you're going to see me add that in and so on. And I'll talk then while it goes because there's no sound. So here we go. So you can see I'm coming over here, I'm picking, going down, hue saturation, and then this properties box opens up. Click colorize. Look what happened when I did that. Now in hue and saturation, I'm adjusting those two. Notice it wasn't much of a shift there, but you want to get that basic hue to where you want to work with it. I'm looking for something in a sepia range, and I'm going to bring down the saturation of that. So you can see that shifting, how quickly that remedied that problem. So I went back up and I just clicked, turned it off and on for you to see the differences. And what happens if I play with the lightness slider? You can even do a little bit of adjusting there. I wanted to make sure that I had a good range, good tonal qualities. It's amazing. You can do that within this tool. And colorize allows it then to affect these colored sections and actually recolor the image. Okay, so I don't know if it went on. There we go. So then I did a quick curves adjustment. I'm not sure you could even see that happening. But what I tend to do once I do those three things, the levels, hue saturation adjustment, and then curves, is I will group those three layers and move them to the top of the stack of layers. And while I'm working, I turn them off, just turn off the group. And then as I work, I'll turn it back on and see, okay, how is it being affected? So you can use those three layers all the way to the end of the process to keep on retoning and readjusting your image. I've found that to just be really helpful. So the next thing, repair spots and large flaws. So I'm not going to show you all of that, obviously, but look at just the difference between these two. I've used a number of different tools. Some of them just the spot healing brush where that works. Sometimes it's using a clone brush in darken or lighten mode, taking from neighboring areas just to try to make quick moves to improve things. Okay, next thing, so there's the next flaw repair. Whoops, it seems like it, oh, I had a little lag on my, there we go. So you can see I'm starting to move in and up around the top here, some things starting to get repaired. Okay, so here's our next little video. It's only 6:30, we're doing okay. So let's see, in this one, let me make sure where we were. Come on, wake up. Trying to contextualize this. Okay, yeah, so this one is going to address this guy, the second from the right. And notice we've got this area of damage in his coat. Are you all seeing my cursor move around?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you can see this same problem exists everywhere. I mean, where all these clothes are. So this is going to show you just one way in which I get rolling on that. So again, you can see what I'm doing over here. Notice I'm stacking up layers. As I work, I will stack layers, and at some point when that layers get too large and the memory is getting a little bit too large, I will save it as a new version. So it'll be AC Elliott ordination number 2. So, okay, so let's go ahead and watch how I go about doing this. So here I'm clicking history brush. I don't even remember what I did with this one. Yeah, you often have to click the layer or it won't let you do your work. And I probably found out that, oh, yep. So what I'm doing now, notice what I'm doing. I'm drawing in an outline because I want to preserve these contours. The multiply history brush darkens whatever's there. Okay, darkens whatever's there. So wherever you draw, it darkens. So I am just laying down for myself a bit of an outline of what I see on this coat, whether I'm right or wrong. I think later on I changed that. So
this is just a guide for you?
Yes, you'll see in a minute why I did that. Because what I'm going to go to next is I'm going to start cloning in. So, and I think I actually ended up pitching this and doing it again. But I basically outlined his coat, the contours of the coat. I wish I could speed this video up, but so let me tell you what's coming. The reason I'm doing this is I'm going to end up painting in all of this color and this value, this tonal value, up into his whole jacket up here, but I don't want these lines to be obliterated when I do that. So what I'll be doing is using the clone brush in darken mode. Darken will compare. So if I clone from here to here, so here I'm doing it. See what I'm doing? I'm selecting where the clone source is, and I'm in darken mode up here. And all I'm doing is cloning. And you can see there's the reference point. It's cloning from there, and it's making anything as dark as this that isn't already darker. So it's going to add those things in and not affect my already painted in dark lines. Kind of cool, huh? Now, obviously, whenever you do cloning, you get these kind of cloning tracks. That's a given. What you end up having to do is fix them. And I've learned some ways to make that a whole lot easier to do. So I will notice I'm resetting my origin point, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start painting up his jacket until I get a little bit more. I'm trying to get rid of, this becomes a problem. It's darker than the area I'm painting from or I'm cloning from. So it's not taking those out yet. For now, I'm only trying to get rid of, I'm trying to bring the tone of the jacket up to be pretty equivalent in all these areas. I think what I do next, if I don't, I could do it, switch to lighten mode and do the same thing. And it'll take all these dark spots out. So doing darken and then doing lighten, you'd end up with a continuous color like this. There are other ways to do this, and I use them. I'll use the mixer brush, and I will use a sort of dry brush. I think on one of my other little videos, I might have that, but I'm not sure I've got that in here for you to see. But you get the idea that this saves a whole lot of time, and it makes use of the difference between multiply and darken. I hear a lot of people who don't use it much saying, well, there's no difference between darken and multiply. Yes, there is. When you clone, there's a huge difference. Notice it is not taking my dark outline out in any way. Only way it would is if I went over something darker than this line, then it would remove it. It would paint over it. So it's pretty smart. I'm going to move on. I think you get the idea. Hopefully it'll let me. Yeah, good. So there's his finished jacket. Once I went through, so I didn't show you, I went through in lighten mode and basically cloned up here. Now I've still got these lines, but those lines are going to become actual shadows of the edges. And I can work with those shadows and blend them in whatever way I want. So the outline is a good thing. it becomes my future shadowing to give depth to the image. Okay, so I rebuild the jacket tones as part of, and I'm sort of moving back and forth between jackets, and I get bored with doing the same thing. So I'll go work on somebody's face. Then I'll come back and work on somebody else's jacket. You can still see there are some major challenges left here. Our last video is going to be kind of fun. Oh, so the siding got rebuilt here. That's again using the lighten mode, cloning in lighten mode. So I cloned from this little area right here, build it up into here, then clone across from there to here. And I get from there, oops, I hit the wrong button. Come on. Oh my gosh, it went backward on me. Okay, so rebuilding siding. So you can see I've just worked across. Oops. It's really slow at responding when you're working in the, okay, so now I'm ready to move down. So there's the second siding repaired. Notice all the clone marks up here, clone tracks, where I have built it up the side of this and then built it across. I've used this area to clone in right here. It speeds things up. Notice those two jackets. I rebuilt 2 more jackets using the same technique. I just love doing that. Okay, now look at the guy in the middle seated, my wife's great-great-grandfather. That's a real mess right there. Now on this one, instead of cloning, what I used was, this one's really high end. And if you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it. It's just another tool, what's called the mixer brush. With the mixer brush, you can paint and you can set the way that brush is going to work. And I have built myself a sort of dry painting brush that I just option click and then change the color that I want to use. And I've got it tip sensitive so that I can vary the way that's going in there, how much I'm laying down at a time. Okay, all right, so let's move to the next one. So another curves adjustment. Every once in a while, I'll do a curves adjustment and just see, so how's this working? Am I getting closer to my destination? Okay, now here, this one is cool. Look at the difference between these two. This one occurred to me a couple of weeks ago working on this image when I thought, this is driving me crazy. I do not want to have to paint everything that is light here, here, here. I don't want to have to manually do all of that if there's an easier way. And I thought, okay, so the difference here is, all this tape residue is a higher exposure than what's around it in context. So I thought, why not copy the layer, put an exposure compensation or exposure adjustment layer on top of that, change the exposure, try to get it as close to what's around it as possible, and then mask it and paint it in. So here's how that worked. That was a really quick job. And that's, as they say, good enough for government work. That gets me closer to where I want all of those garments to be. Notice I didn't do it to his face. I do his face separately later. Okay, so let's see. This is another, so here's my last video. You'll get to see on this one, there's up here the exposure layer that I've built in. Hopefully I go back and show you the actual exposure. Let's see how that works. It's been a while since I looked at it. So layer mask, properties. So that's the mask. Come on, Chris. I hope you went back and showed them the exposure. Well, all right. So what I can tell you is I played around with the exposure in this portion. That's where the properties are. And I lowered the exposure so that I could come back in here, create this mask, invert it, and now paint back in a darker exposure for all these areas. And so that's what you're seeing is, oh, and it's still, we're not going to run the whole thing of this. This is a 10-minute long video. I'll just so you can get the idea, but look at that. Isn't that cool? Now, obviously I cross over into areas that I didn't mean to deal with. All you got to do when you do that and see this isn't working. So I came back, I changed my brush to the black brush and painted that out again. So if I don't like it, just come back and mask it back out. See, I just did that. And now I'm going to paint this back in. So you just go across this. This is a whole lot easier than trying to clone things in and out. So you can see I'm going back and forth there. I just changed it to black. I realized, oops, no, that's not the place. Probably, yep. I don't want to change that. I don't want to change that. I really don't want to change his hand at this point. So you just fine tune it. You go back and forth with using the black brush or the white brush to either mask in or mask out the inverted layer. While this is running, any questions on that? I know that's probably a little, you can see now it's going over here to his leg. Now this is kind of a mess right here, but I can get rid of that later. I'll get rid of that on the next layer once I merge the through here and do the clone and get rid of it, or use the spot healing brush and that'll remove it. But this whole section up here gets darkened. So does all of this as I come through and mask in that change in exposure. So the assumption here was that the exposure change is pretty consistent across all areas that tape was in. When you do this long enough, you start thinking, what am I not seeing and realizing is a tool that I could use that I ought to give a try. And this one occurred to me a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, oh yeah, sweet. Right, Danny? Sweet.
Chris, have you used frequency separation for anything?
I don't use frequency separation for anything. So that's probably something I'll look into too. There are just so many different ways to do things. That's probably a good idea. That's one of those things that have been on my radar, but I've never done it. And I got to go try it. So I realized there's another tool I can put in my arsenal. See, look at all this stuff over here.
Yeah, I think you'll find some use for it. I've used it in like retouching to get rid of wrinkles in clothes and stuff like that. So I assume, using it for the reverse might be useful.
Okay, neat. So yeah, at some point I'll just stop this and we'll go on because we don't have much left. Oh, it's 6:45. Let me stop it anyway. Let's move on to the next thing. So I mentioned earlier, I have this other reference photo that somebody else in the family created just to commemorate the names of who these people are. This is my wife's great-grandfather, A.C. Elliott. But all of these are different. Seated Elder Ira Lawson Gunter. That's A.C. Elliott's father. But this face is the reason I needed this photograph, because what I did with this, and early on I thought, well, these are the same photograph. Well, I discovered after working on great-grandfather's face that this face is not like the one in my original. Not at all. There's some significant differences. And if I use this as a reference image and try to like, well, I'll show you what I did with it. This guy over here, basically what I did was on this photo, I then made selections of the faces and copied those selections out and pasted them in over top of the existing photo. And I use those then to create a little outline, and then I start working on the layer below that, painting the face in and getting the detail. So I've done that for his face, but this is only just the superimposed dropped in image from the other one. So, oops, I do have another video. I think this is a shorty, but one of the things that I do a lot of is with the clone tool in the properties, faces are rather symmetrical, not perfectly so, but if you're missing an eye, missing something like, look at this mess right here. You can use the center point on his face and the clone tool and paint from over here and it'll paint there. And then you come this way and it's mirroring your movement. So let's have a look real quick at this. I won't let this run long because I wonder if this will let me move it up. Oh, it will, yes. I'm gonna move this faster. But basically while we're working here, see that this little setting right here, this is mirror horizontally, this is mirror vertically. So when I click that on and I set this starting point and I come over here and start drawing, actually the end of his mouth is a good place to start because I can sort of guess where that end is going to be over here. And I start painting. Well, I realized, nope, I don't like that. It seems to me, and I ended up coming back and redoing it. But look what it's doing. It's allowing me to put some detail, or at least some simulated detail, a starting point back in. Now, some are going to be misfires, and I'll come back and redo them. But it does allow me to get some things in there that weren't before. I did it on this guy's face, his original face. This looked like his eye was looking way over here, and it was distorted in some other ways, and I used it to redraw his eye in. He was missing half of his mustache over here, and I used this to sort of draw that in and parallel it. But I haven't done any real detail work beyond there. All right, let me speed this up, let you just sort of see faster how it goes. Wow, I should have picked up on that in the last one. So just wherever you think it might help. I even use it there I went back to the clone tool and took that out. Here I took an ear from this guy and put it over here. Later on I found out, nope, that's not gonna work. And I came back and I redid his whole face, or the whole side of his head. I got his head shape wrong in this one. But look, I'm painting back in eye details just under and the cheek and his forehead. That can work pretty nicely. Kind of nice to do this fast. Ooh-wee. And notice this last thing. So I've been painting this on a layer above. Actually, I'm painting from 2 layers here. So what I did was I created a new layer. I turned on, when you clone, you can say current layer only or layers, current layer and below. So what it does is it will clone from here and put it here. So if I screw something up, I just dump that layer and start over again. When it's done and I'm happy with it, then I create a layer that merges all of those above. Notice right here, I'm on restore number 3. So we've gone through multiple versions here. Okay, now let's just speed it up. There's current project status. You saw that before. Notice he's got a new ear. It's not this guy's ear anymore. His head's a little bit better than it was. I think I still need to do some work on it. But look at his beard. Look at his mustache. His eyes are looking in the correct direction. In that reference photo I told you about, his eyes are looking another way. They're looking toward the camera, and that changes everything. So once I realized that, I realized, oops, I can't use the reference photo for this guy either, because he was way different. So, and it's got to look like. Okay, so we are about done. I feel like we've done pretty well. So here's a really cool little story. Yesterday, a friend from Alabama, who's another photographer I've known for 7 years, sent me this message. Hey, I've been contacted by the local college where little Richard will be buried. They're wanting some images worked up and printed from old yearbook photos. Here's the best one of them. How much would you charge to work up a few so they can print and gift to the family? So as we talked about this, that was yesterday afternoon. By 6:30, I realized she needed this for Wednesday morning. That's when he's being buried. And I thought, she said, when do you think you can have just this one done? I said, well, I could probably, before I knew Wednesday, I said, I can surely get it done and to you by the end of Wednesday. And she said, that's not going to work. I need to get it printed, get it to them. They're 45 minutes away. So basically I was thrown into you got an hour to do this scenario. Now, this is a new problem. This came out of a news article. You can see it's pretty broken down. I don't have an original to scan. I had to deal with just what she sent me. And man, was that a pain in the buttock. There's the news article. But how cool is it to get a call from Alabama, from somebody who knows your work, and they've been contacted by Little Richard's family, or the college he went to after he left the music industry, and they want to gift it, and they want somebody to retouch it. So, I mean, this is, you're looking at basically a 1 to 2 hour quickie. I told her, if you're only giving me 2 hours, I said, I'd get it to you by the time I went to bed last night. There's only so much I can do. She said, can you just clean it up a little bit and give me a better version that I could print so that it would look better than this? Well, I wasn't happy with having to do that. That just cuts across my grain. I'm a perfectionist. I want to do this right. I did it last night, sent it to her, got up this morning, did it again, sent that to her, did it another time, and sent it to her again. I like the second version. This is the second version. This second version only took me an hour. The third version took me 35 minutes. I didn't really like the approach I took. Took 3 different approaches to doing it. But pretty cool when this kind of stuff comes to you and you realize, Little Richard, I contributed something to his funeral. Isn't that worth it right there? Questions or comments? I'm done with all that I came to say. Hopefully you've gotten a good sense of what the challenges and difficulties and what some of the tools are.
So, Chris, how did you get rid of the newspaper background in the last image?
There were a couple of things that I did. Shoot, oh man, and it's almost difficult just to tell you all that was done. Here is a combination of the mixer brush, painting the background in a dry brush, a color I wanted to take some of the specks out, painted his hair to bring some of the dark back in. I had to do that outline technique on his face because you try to blow that up and all of a sudden you realize you don't know what this looks like over here. You see these lines going up through it. You can't really tell that face shape. That's what bothered me the most. Can't really tell what's going on with his chin, though that's a little bit of a hint. So I did a good bit of sort of outlining, then repainting, then using different mixer brushes to blend skin and to eliminate the pixelization. Another way that I'll deal with pixelization that I tried in my third attempt, but it didn't work out well because this isn't pixelization. This is just thousands of large dots and spots. It's newspaper print for one thing. There's a technique that I use that is snapshots in the history panel where I create a snapshot of the original. Then I will use the dust and scratches filter to smooth this down and adjust that. Then I create a new snapshot of the dust and scratches filter applied. And then I use the history brush to paint in and out the blurring. And yet I avoid places where there's detail. You'll have to see that really to get how that works. But basically the history brush in lighten and darken mode allow you to paint in or paint out dark spots and scratches or light spots and scratches. So I did that a good bit to sort of get this down to where I could then paint it in. There's so many black spots and white spots that weren't even touched by that. You can still see evidence of that over in his face here. That's why when I'm doing a restoration that's this difficult, I'd really like to have 3 or 4 days because I'm still not satisfied with this. I look at it every time and I think there's still more that I should do on this. but given their constraints, I couldn't. They wanted something better than this that they could print, that would stand for who he was when he came to their college. And this is going to have to be good enough, because she had to get it printed from her lab, had to get it back, has to get it to them tomorrow morning. So, yeah, but it's fun. I love the challenge. While I hated having to send her what I had after, not getting it as polished as I'd like, you have to do what you can do. Didn't say much about this one, but this is one of the ones where I lit it from behind and discovered, here's what it looks like to the eye. And you have no idea what's going on down here. Soon as I lit it from behind, all of this detail was evident in the photograph, and I was able to bring it back. That's where exploring different ways of lighting and imaging, creating your digital original come into play.
Chris, is there a
other questions? We're almost at 7 o'clock.
I have a question for you, Chris. Is there a special scanner bed that you're using to scan your original images in, or is it just like your normal? Okay. It's
an Epson 600 whatever. Sometimes that's a really good first step, because there are settings in the scanning software that allow you to take the first step of improving something.
Awesome.
Play around with those. And when it's a small photo, a lot of times these are small photos and you want to bump up the resolution of it so you've got more to work with.
Sure.
Other questions?
Any last questions for Chris? If not, we're going to let him go get his dinner.
I have one more if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
So Chris, in your original image that you showed of the class with the 8 folds, it looked like the original was a sepia.
Danny's mother
turned it into a but you turned it into a regular black and white, and that seems like that went against your premises of not changing the original image.
I think in that one, the conclusion I drew was that it was not a sepia, it was just sun faded. It had faded to a yellow. And by going to black and white, it made it crisper.
So if you think it was a sepia originally, you would make it a sepia in the finish?
Yeah. And that's really your call. I mean, that's not the most significant thing. If that were like a portrait, a high-end portrait, then maybe it was a sepia. And I'd go for a sepia to have that sort of fine art look to it. For a class photograph, that was Danny's mother's 9th grade class in 1955.
Yep, she's in there. I love it. It's good. Chris, Paulis, thank you so much for sharing
You're
your
welcome.
With us. I really appreciate it. Coming up next week, I said, is Michael Perciarelli. In June, we have a few more of these lined up. I think I'm going to do something on retouching, or at least portrait retouching. Amy Massey is going to do something on watercolors, and we're just lining up people. So if you have a little bit of knowledge you want to drop in a 45-minute segment, please let me know. We'd be happy to get a webinar scheduled for you. And with that said, Chris, thank you so very much. Guys, I hope you have a great night, and stay safe out there.